already presented me, my name is Nelly. I work for WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, in Bulgaria for more than 10 years already. By education, I'm a forester, but I'm a conservationist by heart. And actually, I'm very happy to be with all of you today. This haven't happened recently. I haven't been with more than 2 people in a room, and now we are in a virtual room. So really happy to be together with you. And let's start today's presentation. I hope you can see my screen. Zori, please shake your head. Can you see?
Please extend your presentation, Nelly.
Okay, I will do that. Yeah. Come on. Yeah, it works.
Yes.
Okay, great. So today we're going to talk about the outgrowth forests and what is an outgrowth forest, where in Europe there are still left some outgrowth forests, why to protect them, and how the different approaches and different examples, good examples, bad examples from Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, and Ukraine. I'm going to focus on these 4 countries because WWF Danube Carpathian program has been working in this part of Europe for more than 15 years already, and the forest program is one of the most old and traditional activities and conservation initiatives of WWF in this part of the world. So before jumping into the outgrowth forests, I would like to attract your attention on some terms and definitions used just to be on the same page. So outgrowth forests are sometimes also named virgin forests or primary forests or ancient forests or primeval forests or late zero forests. You see, there are so many terms to describe quite the same thing. There are also a number of definitions describing the outgrowth forests, and they can be grouped into 4 groups. So the first one relates and emphasizes on the lack of human impact and the presence of old trees approaching the maximum age for the species. Of course, the maximum age of the species is different for the different species. It's not the same, for example, when we discuss populus, or when we speak about quercus oaks. The second group of definitions focuses on age, usually around 100, 150 years, combined with the presence of outgrowth characteristics, such as, for example, the large scale and large-sized fallen or standing dead trees, opening of the canopy, which are a result of natural disturbances. And also this definition considers that there may be some human intervention. The third group of definitions about the outgrowth forest emphasize the phase of the forest development, particularly the climax forest in equilibrium, which means that the forest is in a stable state. The trees die of old age and are replaced by a new generation. And this can continue to be a stable situation for centuries. The fourth definition focuses on the economic thresholds. Forests have exceeded the economic optimum for logging, usually between 80 or 150 years, depending on the species. So maybe you have noticed that categories 1 and 3 of the groups presented here describe very old forests, almost untouched by the humans. And categories 2 and 4 describe forests that may have had some human impact. One definition cannot be said to be that it is better comparing to another one, since there are many differences which are due to the diversity of the forest landscapes. But for the purposes of today's presentation, and just to be on the same page, I would like to suggest that we all have the common understanding and accept that old-growth forests are natural ecosystems dominated by large, old trees, usually of a mixed species composition, and with all ages presented in the particular forest community. Old growth forests also contain many scattered dead trees, both standing and lying on the forest floor, and there are no clearly visible indications of human activities. So the ecological processes are not significantly disturbed. But let's have a look on some pictures now. And okay, you see this picture, and obviously there are some very old and large-scale trees. However, this is not an old-growth forest, and as you can notice yourself. You even see that there are some birdhouses placed on the trunks of the trees, which means that there is something wrong with this forest. It might look nice for the general public. Usually people enjoy very much seeing forests like this, very similar to the forests that we have in the urban parks. However, the real old growth forest looks completely different. And here is one example from Ordesa y Monte Perdido National Park. You see that there are very thick trees, both dead and alive, with high variety of microhabitats like hollows and cracks, which are very suitable and provide habitat for specialized species. Also, there is a high quality and quantity of dead wood, standing dead trees or fallen dead trees, which also is a habitat for a variety of deadwood-dependent species, the so-called saproxylix organisms. We also noticed that there are small gaps in these forests, which were created by natural disturbances, and they increase the heterogeneity and also allow for regenerations by opening the space and ensuring the light comes to the ground floor. Forest canopy occupies several vertical layers usually, and there is low amount of light in the old growth forests. So the light is difficult to reach the grounds, and that's why you can notice that there predominance of shade-tolerant species. And also to mention that the forest canopy comprises of various species and age classes, and in such a way it favors the high species diversity, increases the resilience of the forest, and obviously represent a healthy and stable forest. So moving further, I would like to briefly discuss the question that you might have: where in Europe are the old growth forests? One of the most recent and comprehensive studies dealing with this question is the one developed by Sabatini and co-workers, scientists from and researchers from different countries in Europe, also from Bulgaria, Romania, Czech, etc. I will provide a link to the study of Sabatini, which is one of the best ones I've seen and with most recent data about the old growth forests. So you can further explore it yourself. But still, just to mention a couple of interesting facts. So the study of Sabatini uses the terms primary forests. However, this overlaps quite a lot with what we agreed to use behind the term old growth forests. And you can notice on this map that the biggest areas of old growth forests or primary forests are located in, of course, Russia, but also Scandinavia, as well as on the Balkan Peninsula, Carpathian Mountains, and the central part of Europe. These forests are outlined here with the green polygons. And the others forests that were identified as old growth in the rest of the Europe, you can see are presented here with blue triangles. So data on the old growth forests is frequently incomplete or inconsistent among countries, also because the different countries deal with different definitions, terms, etc. But basically, from the study of the Sabatini, we know that outgrowth forests cover like 1,400,000 of hectares in 32 countries in Europe. This is what the scope of the study was. And this is roughly less than 1% of the Europe's forest area. To be exact, this is 0.7% of the Europe's forest area. This is the area covered by the outgrowth forests. Most of these forests are protected, nearly 90% of them, 90, but only 46% of these protected forests are included within strict categories of protection. And these forests mostly occur in remote mountainous areas or other hardly accessible areas. That's why actually they have been preserved to our days. Okay, the top 10 countries in Europe with the biggest area of outgrowth forests, as you can imagine, are Russia, Finland, Belarus, Norway, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Sweden, Lithuania, and Poland. This is like the gradual distribution. And more information about the exact hectares, etc., you can discover in the Sabatini study. And here you see the link to it. But let's talk a little bit about the importance of the outgrowth forests, because we all know that this is the answer to the question why it is worth protecting the outgrowth forests for the time being and also for the future and the future generations. Of course, the conservation values of the outgrowth forests, such as biodiversity protection and provision of ecosystem services, are of the biggest importance. In addition, outgrowth forests are also like outdoor laboratories for the scientists. They are also a source of inspiration for artists and people of the art. And the outgrowth forests, again, to mention, are extremely important for the reasons of providing islands of tranquility and conditions for survival of the different species. They store a valuable gene pool. They ensure conservation of the biodiversity and improve the water balance of the ecosystems. So many values that the outgrowth forests have. Sometimes we underestimate them, but I see there might be a question, I will not be able to answer right now the questions in the chat. So I would suggest that when I finish with the presentation, we'll get back and start with the first question to the last, or you can ask and not write if you prefer, of course. So moving further, and this is actually the focus of today's presentation, to present the different initiatives, tools, and mechanisms for protection of the outgrowth forests. Sometimes we as people are dealing and digging too much into details, arguing about one definition or another, and we forget that until we are arguing, we are actually losing the valuable outgrowth forest, because they might be managed at the same time, they might be cut. So one of the traditional ways for ensuring protection of the outgrowth forest sits within the national legislation related to protected areas. In this case, outgrowth forests are declared reserves and other categories of protected areas. Of course, there are different examples. I will start with Bulgaria, but I will also discuss briefly the Romania, Ukrainian, and Slovakian case. So in Bulgaria, we have 6 categories of protected areas according to the provisions of the Protected Areas Act. These categories are reserves, strict reserves, national parks, natural parks, protected sites, and protected landmarks. They have different levels of protection. Reserves and national parks have the highest level of protection. And in Bulgaria, nearly 80,000 of hectares of old-growth forests are included in the strictest category, reserves and national parks. No human activities are allowed there. Even if you want to go and do some research in reserves, in the strict reserves, you need to ask for permission from the national authorities. For example, forests which fall within the boundaries of the natural parks might be managed. There are some management regimes which are allowed to happen there. So some harvesting is possible, but it should be under certain restrictions. Even in national parks, I should say that some management is possible because it is often masked in a way under the measures for maintenance and restoration of forest habitats. And this is kind of a manipulation. Such example we had with Pirin National Park and with the management plan of Pirin National Park, where old growth forests of some endemic species like Pinus heldraki and Pinus leucodermis might have been managed and locked because these measures for restoration and maintenance apply. So you see that on paper, these forests within reserves and protected areas are protected, but what happens in reality is a little bit different. So for comparison, here are some figures about the old growth forests in Romania, Slovakia, and Ukraine that you can see on your screen. In Romania, protected old growth forests with strict protection are 15,000 of hectares. In Ukraine, about 35,000 of hectares of old growth forests are located in protected areas and are protected by law, by strict protection. In Slovakia, there are nature protected areas of different categories. And the Nature Protection Act of Slovakia recognizes 5 levels of protection. First level of protection is the least strict, and the 5th level of protection is the most strict one, which means that no intervention is allowed to happen there. However, in relation to forests, it can be made some sort of forest management, meaning harvesting, in these different levels of protection, in the protected areas from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th level. Therefore, Slovakia considers only the 5th level, the strictest protection, as the one that secures the real protection of forests. At present, the area of the Slovakian old growth forests included in this 5th category is 7,300 hectares. Another 3,000 hectares of old growth forests, which are included under other protected areas regimes, can be still harvested. Another interesting example for protection of old growth forests comes from Romania. And this is namely the Romanian catalog of virgin and quasi-virgin forests. They use this term, virgin and quasi-virgin forests, to describe the old growth forests. You see, difference of terms, difference of definitions, but still we are speaking about the same thing. And the main purpose here is how to ensure the protection of these forests, no matter how we call them. So in Romania, they have created this national catalog, which was established in 2016. And this is a dynamic process. But they made some changes in their legislation in order to allow for such amendment to be done. And all forests which meet the criteria about the virgin and quasi-virgin forest can be included after research, detailed research and studies on the field. These forests can be included in the national catalog. Once included in this national catalog, any management of this forest is forbidden. So far, there are like 30,000 of hectares of old growth forests which have been included in the national catalog of Romania, and the process still continues. Okay, another tool for protection of the old growth forests comes through the international conventions, treaties, and agreements. For example, UNESCO, if we take the case of UNESCO, years ago, there was one category which is named according to the UNESCO language property, which was included in the list of UNESCO heritage. This is the so-called ancient and primeval beech forests of the Carpathian and other regions of Europe. This transboundary property, they use the term property for the old growth forest in this case. So this transboundary property, this old growth forests stretches over 12 countries: Albania, Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Germany, Italy, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Ukraine. The date of the inscription was 2007, but the property, the area of the old growth forests was extended later on in 2011, and the latest extension was in 2017. Now, the area of the UNESCO property of these old growth forests, which are protected through UNESCO, is 92,000 of hectares, and the buffer zone around is 250,000 of hectares. This is also a very good tool. Of course, it has the advantages and disadvantages as any tool, but this is still another level of protection for the old growth forests. Another example is the Carpathian Convention, which is signed by the countries which have some areas and territories on the Carpathian mountains. And through the Carpathian Convention, 300,000 of hectares of old growth forests, which were identified in these countries, are being protected. According to this convention, the participatory countries, the signing countries, have to include the old growth forests into their national protected areas, or to ensure their protection by using different tools, like, for example, in Romania, their national catalog. And now we come to another tool for protection of old growth forests, which is coming from the EU nature protection legislation, from the European nature protection legislation. You know that this legislation is applicable for all member states of the European Union. And although there is no dedicated piece of the EU legislation explicitly talking about forests, the protection of the forest is somehow incorporated in some of the existing directives, like, for example, the Habitat Directive of the European Union, 9243 is the number, by means of the establishment of Natura 2000 ecological network. And I'm going to give here an example from Bulgaria. That's why you see the map of Bulgaria. With the green, light green color, you see Natura 2000 sites within the country, and with the blue points and polygons are outlined the old growth forests, which are protected within Natura 2000 network sites. And I'm going to tell you how this happened. And actually, we are very proud with this achievement. This is the first such achievement in Europe. And we have used the tools of the Natura 2000 and the EU legislation to ensure protection of the most valuable forests of old growthness in Bulgaria. So very briefly, just to get an idea, 1/3 of the country's territory is covered by forests. This is nearly 3.8 million of hectares. And about 55% of Bulgaria's forests are classified as forest habitats and included in Natura 2000 sites. Old growth forests are element of the system for maintaining the favorable conservation status of Natura 2000 forest habitats, which is in accordance with the requirements of the Habitat Directive. And this is a key. This is a key. In 2009, experts from environmental NGOs, from science and research sector in Bulgaria, initiated the idea for designation and conservation of 10% of each forest habitat type in Natura 2000 as old-growth forests. In Bulgaria, we have 27 forest habitat types. So this idea was shaped and officially proposed and discussed to the expert council of the Executive Forest Agency, which is one of the forest authorities in Bulgaria, and the idea was consequently approved. This is also important to mention, that there was understanding on behalf of the forest authorities that we should be able to ensure favorable conservation status of the forest habitats included in Natura 2000. So what happened next? The next step was to develop a guidance called Regimes for Sustainable Management of Forests in Natura 2000. And once these guidelines were developed, they were again discussed by the stakeholders and adopted by the expert council. And in 2011, they have become effective and part of the implementation and the requirements of the regulation on forest fellings. So there was a need to adapt somehow the national regulatory framework relevant to the forests. The next phase was during 2014 and 2016, and throughout this period, an extensive work on identification and mapping of old-growth forests was carried out. This identification and mapping of old-growth forests was concentrated mainly on state-owned forest habitats within Natura 2000. And it was a long process, and everybody contributed according to its possibilities. So environmental NGOs, experts from science and research organizations, state authorities, etc. As a result, was developed a list of forest compartments and subcompartments, which was discussed and finally approved. And this resulted into nearly 10% of each forest habitat in Natura 2000 that were selected and set aside. They were excluded from logging as old-growth forests and potential old-growth forests. Just to mention again that this affects only the state-owned forests within Natura 2000 in Bulgaria. Now, similar process is being developed for the municipality-owned forests, but I will discuss it a little bit later. So based on this work, was developed a list of forest compartments and subcompartments, which represent the 25 forest habitats, and they were included in the whole network of Natura 2000 in Bulgaria. This list was reviewed several times during the consultation phase, and in 2015, upon amendments in the regulation of the forest fellings, the first agreed definition of old-growth forest was incorporated finally into the national legislation. And it provided for clear criteria about the old-growth forests. This was also a very important step. And the whole process was successfully completed in November 2016 by issuing ordinance of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forests for protection of 109,000 of hectares of old-growth forests, all of them state-owned, falling within Natura 2000 network in Bulgaria. Based on this requirement for securing favorable conservation status of forest habitat under the indicator forests in old age within Natura 2000 site, actually is addressed the Habitat Directive. The core of the idea, the main part of the idea, is linking to the requirements of the Habitat Directives to the national legislative context with the development of the so-called regimes for sustainable management of forests that I have mentioned. They give the guidances in how the forest habitats should be managed, and also they include this requirement for setting aside 10% of the forest habitats within Natura 2000 as old growth forests with non-intervention. It is important to say that to ensure this, the transparency of the whole process and engagement of all interested stakeholders, from WWF Bulgaria, we have developed publicly available GIS forest platform, which is an online platform and is pretty modern and very much used by different stakeholders. It was important to have the visual picture of the forests that have been identified as old growth forests in order to be able to discuss the most valuable old growth forests. So the transparency is very important. And of course, this is really a huge achievement. 109,000 of hectares of old growth forests were additionally set aside to the already existing old growth forests included in reserves. The area of the old growth forests included in the reserves, the strict categories of protection, as I have mentioned, is nearly 80,000 of hectares. And in 2016, we have added additional 109,000 of hectares. This is huge. This is huge. So this is how we used this EU relevant legislation. There is another process which is going on right now, another initiative since the beginning of this year. A new initiative of the EU has started. The idea is to ensure the protection of the old growth forests in Europe. This process is still ongoing and will become clear for the future what and how this will be ensured. But the first, this is, however, the first step into the right direction. I have mentioned already that there is no single legislation about forests in European Union, but the protection of forests is incorporated into other directives. So the Council and the member states say that they are deeply concerned that the current policies and actions at the global level on the conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of forests are insufficient to halt the deforestation and degradation of the world's forests. That's why they agreed and enhanced a European action to urgently prioritize and implement certain measures to ensure the protection of the most valuable forests. We will see what will happen for the future, but this is really something that gives us a hope. Moving forward, because yeah, the time is running. Another tool for protection of old growth forests. This is the instrumentarium provided by the requirements of the FSC Forest Management Certification. FSC, or Forest Stewardship Council, the abbreviation of these three letters, is an international voluntary certification scheme which promotes responsible forest management through achieving a balance between environmental, social, and economic aspects of the forest management. FSC standard consists of 10 principles and a number of criteria and also of indicators which are nationally based. I will not speak more about this because this is a completely, how to say, extensive topic for discussion. But I will just mention that FSC requires protection of the old growth forests within FSC certified forest areas. And this is required by criterion 6.5 and particularly by indicator 6.5.4 of the national FSC standard. In Bulgaria, we have a national FSC standard, and This indicator 6.5.4 actually requires that at least 5% of the area of the management unit, which is certified, is designated as old-growth forest. And no human interference is allowed there. So no management, no cutting, nothing. In the absence of forests which have characteristics of old-growth forests, potential old-growth forests might be selected in order to meet this requirement of the FSC certification. Otherwise, it will not be possible to certify the particular forest area. So in Bulgaria, 40% of the forests are already FSC certified, and this results into 75,000 of hectares of old growth forests which are excluded from harvesting. So you see that this is another way to protect the old growth forests. I have to mention that some of these old growth forests overlap with the list in the ordinance of the ministry, but not all of them. So we can consider the FSC certification as additional tool for ensuring protection of the old growth forests. This is a very good example for a voluntary mechanism applied for protection of old growth forests, because FSC is a voluntary tool. It is not obligatory. Another tool for protection of old growth forests might be the compensatory mechanism and measures under the Rural Development Program. As you know, the European Fund for Rural Development could ensure European financial support for the protection of the old growth forests. And this fund, the ERDF, European Rural Development Fund, supports or compensates for additional restrictions imposed on the land owners for biodiversity protection. This means that only restrictions that go beyond the requirements of the national legislation might ask for compensation. So in the case of Romania and Bulgaria, or Slovakia, and I'm excluding Ukraine because Ukraine is not EU member. In the case of Romania and Bulgaria and Slovakia, if old growth forests are legally protected, harvesting is forbidden, but EU funds cannot be used to compensate forest owners. However, there are old growth forests which are not owned by the state, which are owned by the municipalities or by private individuals, and they might apply for such compensation. For example, in Romania, there are two possible compensation mechanisms that were identified and will be proposed for the next financial period of the Rural Development Program. The first option is aimed at municipality and community-owned forests, and would provide like 200 euro per year per hectare as a compensation for economic losses, plus another 200 euro per year per hectare to be invested in local programs around these areas where the old growth forests are, in order to create green jobs for community members. The full amount of such compensation for like 1,000 hectares of old growth forests, which currently are not included in the Romanian catalog, thus are eligible for such financing, would account to 500,000 euro per year. However, this can only work for community-owned forests. The other option is focused on private forest owners or association of private forest owners. And the idea is to provide one-off payment, like 5,000 hectares, 5,000 euro per hectare. And this option is pretty similar to the land acquisition. However, the difference is that the person still owns the forest, but without harvesting regimes and rights. So it keeps the ownership, but cannot harvest the forest. Of course, these two options could be also applied in other countries like Slovakia or Bulgaria, but their application is limited to old-growth forests in non-state public forest ownership and private ones. It can't be applied for state-owned forests. Another interesting example, adoption of an old-growth forest. Adopt a forest. We have tested this in Bulgaria like 7 years ago. WWF Bulgaria identified one forest owner in the central part of the country, which owns a nice old growth forest. And there was also a company who was interested in claiming that is responsible and environmentally friendly. And they said they want to do something good for the forest. So an agreement was signed between the forest owner and between the company for 15 years. And the company agreed to compensate the owner for not cutting and harvesting its forests. Unfortunately, this agreement was supposed to be for at least 15 years, but it lasts only 3 years, which is not really sustainable in the future. Just a second, I have to find the cable because my computer battery is running low. Sorry. I'll do it right away. Okay, now it's better. So we have to be very careful. This adopt a forest initiative or idea might be sustainable only if both of the sides, the company and the owner, are very committed. In the other case, it could collapse anytime. And of course, old growth forests can be protected upon the willingness of the owner of the old growth forest. Another example from Bulgaria. The last few years, WWF Bulgaria has been working to study and identify the old growth forests which are owned by municipalities, so they're municipality-owned forests. And we have researched like nearly 15,000 of hectares, from which we identified 5,000 of hectares to meet the criteria of the old growth forests. And we have presented the results to the 33 municipalities that we have managed to cover and asked them to consider declaring their municipal old growth forests for protection. So far, one municipality, namely Botevgrad municipality, agreed to do so, but there is also interest from other municipalities which are owners of old growth forests. And we really hope that this first successful example of Botevgrad municipality will be applied in other municipalities. How it works? The municipality council discusses and agrees that they will declare certain area of the old growth forests for protection. And finally, the mayor of the municipality issues an ordinance, and this is it. Of course, this is also not very stable for the future. We all know that the politicians are changing all the time. That's why it is very important here to have commitment on behalf of the local population, local people. They're very important. And yeah, we are coming to the question, what else and how we can ensure, what else and how and what can we do in order to ensure the effective protection of old growth forests? Because yes, the old growth forest might be protected on paper, but when you go to the forest, it is sometimes completely different picture. Anyway, how can we do better? First, to understand the values of the old growth forests and to communicate this to the decision makers, to the different stakeholders, including business, and also to the society. Society is very important because society can exercise strong control and public pressure for better and effective protection of old growth forests. That's why such online-based platform as the one that I mentioned are very effective and very useful because they provide interested active citizens with the information in real time what is happening in these forests. And yeah, transparency is very, very important. Also, regular monitoring of the old growth forests and their situation and status by remote sensing technologies, but also real monitoring on the field. And all the time we have to communicate to the European Union, to other European and international organizations about the global values of the European old growth forests. Because in Europe, even this is a small continent comparing to the others, we still have some of the most valuable forests in the world. And we have to keep talking about this. So here, there is one slide with sources of additional information about the old growth forests in Bulgaria and the other regions of the world. Also the article of Sabatini, a video with a movie about the old growth forests, etc. You can check it later. Here I would like to especially thank to the people who provided photos for this presentation, but not only the people who have been working for many years already for the identification and mapping of old growth forests. Here on this photo, you see Professor Zlatanov. Some of you have heard about him, I believe. He's one of the best experts in the world in forest ecology. And he has been participating in the study and identification of old growth forests in Bulgaria, and also is one of the co-authors of the study prepared by Sabatini. So here you see him in the field next to one very old beech tree. And I would like to thank you to your attention. Here is my email. If you have questions, you can always write to me. And now we can just have a look on, but I have to stop share. And then maybe I will be able to have a look on the chat if there are any questions there. So we can start with them, and then you can ask if you'd like. So, okay, one question from Petko Cvetkov. Does this number of 80,000 hectares in Bulgaria covers the territory of old growth forests declared as such by the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Forestry with a special order? No, these 80,000 hectares in Bulgaria are old growth forests included in the strict reserves and national parks. No national parks, in the strict reserves and the reserves. This is the strictest category of protection. So these 80,000 hectares of old growth forests are protected through the Protected Areas Act within reserves. Does this cover area already declared as a protected areas, in particular strict reserves and national parks? Yes, the answer is yes, mainly in the reserves. And another question from Petko: what was the reason of canceling the contract between the private owner and the company on the protection of the old growth forest? Is the forest still alive and old? Well, the reason to cancel the contract was that the company said, okay, for 3 years we have been responsible and very nature friendly, but we will not go for it for the future. So they said they will not compensate the private owner to keep the forest as it is and not harvesting it. However, the private forest owner still keeps this forest without management, without harvesting, which is good. But the reason is that this is a very old person who is not able to manage its forests. And it is not a big area. It's something like 10 hectares or, yeah, between 8 and 10 hectares, if I remember well. So this mechanism might be successful, but there should be a really high level of commitment from the owner of the old growth forest and from the company. Because if the company stops compensating financially the owner is free to do management with its forest. Another question from Antonia Cotta. Is the redwood forest in California an old growth forest? Well, as I have never been there, but as far as I have seen some photos in the internet and some movies, yes, I believe that this redwood forest in California is an old growth forest. Another question from Marcia Motsuri. I hope I pronounce correctly the name. The question is, the 4 definition groups which were mentioned in the beginning of the presentation be combined found in one forest. Can they be combined found in one forest? Well, I believe so, yes. Definition is one thing, forest is a living organism, forest is changing all the time. So yes, these 4 definition groups, of course, they can be in a way mixed, overlapping to each other, and I believe you can see a forest which somehow reflects all of them. Another question from Petko Cvetkov. How much does it cost to pay to the person to continue preserving the old growth forest? I believe you're asking about the adopt the forest mechanism. Is there a chance to purchase it from the person? This particular person in this particular forest, no, we have investigated this option. This person didn't want to sell its forest. He wanted to have it, to have the ownership rights, and was not willing to sell it. But I believe that there might be some private forest owners in the country, in Bulgaria, and not only, in other countries too, that are willing to sell their forests because they cannot ensure proper management for them. So this is a matter of negotiation. And the first question was, how much does it cost to pay to the person to continue preserving it? Well, within the agreement between the company and the person owning the forest, the calculations were made based on the losses that the person would have had if he didn't harvest his forest. So this type of mathematics, a simple mathematics we have used. Another question from Elena Stoicheva. What is the real condition of old growth forest in Bulgaria? I hear there is a lot of illegal action in forests. Well, there are illegal actions in forests, yes. Not all of these illegal actions are taking place in old growth forests. I have to say that even in strict nature reserves, it happens to have illegal logging. For example, in Kupena Reserve, yes, this happens. But I also have to say that from my personal opinion, for the last 5 years, the society is more and more interested in forests in Bulgaria. And the society is exercising like a pressure on the public authorities. So less and less often we see illegal logging in old growth forests. And this is thanks to the interest on behalf of the general public, on behalf of the environmental NGOs, on behalf of the scientists. Also, once the state has declared that it will set aside old growth forest, it is obliged to take measures to enforce properly its decision. A question from Bogdan Anton Radu. Is WWF Bulgaria doing a continuous advertisement towards the local councils for the cooperation for the old growth forests in their community? Well, it's not a continuous advertisement, but we have been contacting the local municipalities, local councils on several stages. Once we have completed with the survey and the study on the field, and we had the old growth forests identified and mapped, we have organized a press conference, and we invited all of the municipalities, representatives of municipalities. So this was the first, the first moment when we met face to face with some of them, because not all of them came. The second step was to submit officially the respective data and information about the old growth forests identified within their communities. And then we started calling them over phone, asking for meetings. And the beginning of this year, we started to organize face-to-face meetings. Me and my colleagues from the forest team of WWF in Bulgaria, we went to meet people from these local communities, the mayors or the representative responsible for the forest, etc. So we have started to negotiate. We have seen that they're very open, and some of them see this as a good opportunity, declaring the old growth forests for protection. Of course, as politicians, they also consider the fact that the people living in their settlements, in their towns or villages will be very happy, because people in Bulgaria are usually very sensitive about the forests, and they're very happy if someone do something good about the forests. So the good politicians, they see this and use it. But we don't mind, as long as they ensure protection of these old growth forests. Now, because of the situation with the coronavirus and the lockdown, we had to stop this interaction with the municipality councils, but I hope that for the future we'll be able to continue and have more municipal forests declared for protected ones. A question from Marcia Mutsuri. How much back in time we have indications for forest protection? And in this frame, do we have any forests, for example, around Balkan area or Europe in general, that might have been used like 1,000 years ago, but were abandoned in the process and returned to something close to their previous state? So today they can be considered again as old growth forests. Well, I know that the first protected areas in Bulgaria was actually a reserve, and it was declared in Stranja Mountain, the most south eastern corner of Bulgaria, next to the border with Turkey, Silkusia Reserve. It was declared in 1934, and this is the first protected area for Bulgaria. 1 year later was declared Vitusha Park as a pupils park at this time. So this is for Bulgaria. About Scandinavia, I know that the beginning of the previous century, they have declared the first protected areas there, but I really don't know if they have been used like 1,000 years ago or not. I cannot answer this question. I doubt that there are forests in Bulgaria, that there are forests in Europe that have survived such a long period without any intervention. There might be some, maybe in Scandinavia or in Russian part and in some corners of Carpathians, but this is not the most important. The most important is to find the way to preserve even potential old growth forests, because in 20, 30 years of time, if left intact without intervention, they will be a real old growth forests. Question from Petko.
If I can add something related to that.
Yes, Kote, go ahead. Very nice to hear you.
Hi. Some historians say, I already wrote it, that the first forest conserved in written paper is in early 9th century in nowadays Bulgaria by Khan Krum, after the battle with the Byzantium and Emperor Nicephorus. He banned the cutting of the forest along the Balkan mountain passage. It was purely on military purposes, but that's the oldest protection anyway of the forests in Europe, and it's more than 1,000 years ago.
Very interesting, thank you.
Also afterwards, some forests like the famous Beoveja forest was preserved mainly because they were hunting grounds of many European kings or counts or noblemen, and similar things were even in Ottoman Empire with Vodem forest, which is also one of the last lowland forests in Bulgaria. That's
Thank you very much, Kote. This is the advantage of having friends with you who are interested in history and forestry at the same time. I'm not very much interested in history. That's why I was not able to answer the question of Marcia. But thank Kote for this intervention. And another question we have from Petko. What is the situation with primary forest logging in Romania? There is an international campaign for preserving the Romania's forests. What is actually the difference between the situation with the old growth forest logging in Bulgaria and Romania? Okay, so what I know about the situation in Romania is that our colleagues from WWF are doing their best to ensure that as many as possible old growth forests are included in the catalog, the national catalog of Romania that I have talked about. Because this national catalog of Romania actually provides a very good opportunity for preserving these forests. It has to be, it is incorporated already into the legislation, and of course, the enforcement of the legislation is an issue. And the question is how well the Romanian forest-related legislation is enforced. I believe that in Bulgaria, we have some advantages because we work all together, all the environmental NGOs in Bulgaria, we work all together. We complement to each other's work, which is not the case in Romania, as far as I know. There are some differences and different opinions and very strong oppositions between the different environmental NGOs in Romania. And this does not help to improve the situation with the old growth forest protection. So I believe also that in Bulgaria, we are very lucky to have active citizens, active people who become more and more knowledgeable about the forests and often decide to do something by themselves and not stay anonymous and fight for certain forest and do something to protect it, which is really great. And I really appreciate these people. So I move down. Bogdan Anton Radu is asking, which is the level of cooperation between WWF and other NGOs from Bulgaria and the foresters in the country? Well, the level of cooperation between WWF and other NGOs in Bulgaria is very high. We have like a national coalition of environmental NGOs, which is called For the Nature. You can check the website, forthenature.org. And all active conservation and environmental NGOs in Bulgaria are part of this coalition, and we help each other. We contribute. There are some NGOs which are specialized more into forestry issues, others which are specialized more into protected areas, legislation and enforcement, others specialized in, let's say, energy, clean energy and climate, etc. So we complement to each other and we stand all together. When we want to fight for something, when we would like to protect something and we are opposing to the government, we all stand together. And this is our biggest strength, I would say. So the level of cooperation is very, very high. We are the same. No matter that I'm from WWF or Petko is from Greenpeace or somebody else is from Balkani Wildlife Society, we are just the same. And we help each other with what we can. And the cooperation with the foresters in the country, well, I have to say that we cooperate pretty well with the foresters, with the forest authorities, but also with the forest management units, foresters in the field. Of course, about some issues we argue with them, like the illegal loggings, like the law enforcement, and those kind of problems. But about other things, we are on the same page and we try to work together and to collaborate, like, for example, promoting the FSC certification, restoration of valuable forest habitats, etc. So we play with open cards, and I think this is the reason to be successful in a way. any link for that, if you please. Marcia, I hope you ask, I think you ask actually Kocetu to provide a link about what he said. And he is answering here in the chat box. You can read it, and I hope he will provide what he can as a source of information. Another question from Bogdan Anton Radu. Are you aware of Primu Faro project? With this abbreviation, not really, Bogdan. I haven't heard about it. If you'd like, I will be happy to get in contact with you. You saw my email, and I'll be happy to exchange information about it.
Also, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, Bogdan Antonu Radu.
Yes, please. Yeah, of course.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So the project was made by German NGO. I don't know if they have any headquarters in Romania, because I'm from Romania, and I've read the study of my university related to their project, and they were saying something about increasing the old growth forest catalog, let's say, with 500,000 hectares of old growth forest, but they had a lot of problems into their into the way that they have done the project and the research, because they were overlapping with UNESCO designated forest in Romania, and based on their way of I don't know, measure the old growth forest, they were kind of taking down a very big part of the UNESCO already designated forest, because they were something like saying that, for example, from the roads, from the access roads, 1 kilometer as a bumper zone to be defined as I don't know how to call it, but
like a buffer.
Yeah, like a buffer, like to just and that thing actually into that UNESCO designated forest, it was designated together with those roads, those forest roads that you know, it was kind of overlapping with what the project Primo Faro project said. But I will try to get the link, and I will send it into the chat.
Yeah, it will be interesting. And well, I know that the criteria about the virgin and quasi-virgin forests in Romania have been long time discussed among the different stakeholders. And finally, they have been included as a requirement into this Romanian forest-related legislation. So forests which are studied on the field and meet the criteria about virgin and quasi-virgin forests can be included into the Romanian National Catalogue. Once included into the Romanian National Catalogue, it is obligatory to not harvest into these forests and to ensure their protection. But of course, there might be different methods, models for research and for study. However, I would appreciate if you can send more information. It will be interesting to dig into it about this Primo Faro project.
Yeah, and I want to underline only one thing, and then I will just pass the microphone. The thing is, like, this old growth forest situation and criteria and so on, it's kind of entering into a conflict, because most of our forests, they are managed in that way that they go beyond 100 years old into the management plan and into the way, although indeed we interfere as forest engineers and foresters, we interfere every 10 years with a management plan. But the thing is that it kind of, from my point of view, it's entering into this conflict of designating this forest, for example, as old growth forest, although already 100 and 120 years ago we have started to promote this very natural style management plans and so on and so forth. And right now we are kind of obliged to stop it, although this was one of the reasons why we still have the old growth forest, because we have managed into a very sustainable way. let's say.
Well, I have to say that I have been in Romania many times, and you guys really have beautiful forests, really impressive. Okay, another question from Kalina Pachejeva. What about the old growth forests in Natura 2000, but out of protected areas, if there are any? Which mechanisms for their protection is applied? Do you have example of such cases? Yes? Maybe Kalina, you joined a little bit later. There is a mechanism for ensuring protection of old growth forests falling within Natura 2000, and it comes out from the requirement of the Habitat Directive and the national interpretation and the regimes that have been developed and approved here for Bulgaria on national level to set aside 10% of the forest habitat, of each forest habitat, as an old growth forest. And this has been carried out since 2009 until 2016. And in 2016, upon an ordinance of the Minister of Agriculture and Forests, 109,000 of hectares of old growth forests within Natura 2000 have been declared for protection. I hope this answered to your question. If you need more details, you're welcome to contact me. A question from Alexander Golubov. Are there any species which are most threatened at the moment? If yes, which? Of course, yes, there are species which are threatened at the moment, very threatened, and we can talk about this for hours. Unfortunately, it's difficult for me to mention the English names. So from the woodpeckers, from the owls, from the mammals, there are many such species. Koce, Volchev, if you are still there with us, and if you know the English names of Triprska ovač and Belogrubka ovač, please help me. If you are not there with us, we will leave this question for maybe for another lecture to some specialists.
Does Alexander mean 3 species or any species?
I don't know. Maybe Alexander can clarify.
Because from 3 species, maybe so-called Macedonian pine, Pinus piuti, and Bosnian pine, Pinus leucodermis, but they are mostly in the national parks, so they're not, I think they're relatively well protected there. From the birds, we are the most southern distribution of some glacial species, I mean with glacial refugium origin, like what Nelly said, tritoid woodpecker, white-backed woodpecker, tagmounds, or also called boreal owl, Aegolios funereus, capercaillie, Tetraurugaus, also some flycatchers, Phycedua semiturquata, which are
Phycedua parva.
Yeah, which are related to the forests, but maybe on the genetic level and subspecies level, or especially at lower altitude where there was stronger human influence and climate change, there are very serious changes, but I'm not very familiar with this topic, so I cannot be helpful, but I expect on this level, genetical diversity within the species maybe for some subspecies is really vulnerable species there, and that's from me.
Thank you very much, Koce, for this help. And maybe if there is an interest about the threatened species which are somehow linked to the old growth forests, we can contact some of our colleagues who are specialized and work with some subproxidic species, which are definitely very linked to the old growth forest due to the presence of the dead timber there. And yeah, maybe if there is an interest, or you can think about having another lecture, or I don't know, about this topic. Do you have any other questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Yes. Hi. Can I?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Hi. My name is Edward. I'm from Malta, And my interest, I've been following, first of all, is the old growth forests. These have been definitely one of the things I read a lot about. Unfortunately, in Malta, we don't have these kind of beautiful natural assets. And so I always look with attentiveness. I look a lot with attentiveness for this kind of ecological wealth there is in Bulgaria. And one of the places that interests me most is the Central Balkan National Park. And the reason is because, and in particular, the thermophilic forests that have a very high percentage of endemic, not only endemics, but old species that have survived the Ice Age. And even other glacial period, the tertiary period. What kind of what plans of conservation are there? And also, I actually spoke to a person who worked there, and I even highlighted a particular pathway. I don't know how the kind of management of these places is. What concerns me is one thing. For me, the Central Balkan National Park is, for me, one of the most beautiful places I've seen, even when it comes to environment. Unfortunately, sometimes what happens is that even when I look at Facebook, for example, I notice when I look at Facebook, I notice sometimes when I even write, for example, the name in Bulgarian, for example, I see a lot of pictures of people, some of whom are collecting mushrooms, for example, in the strictly protected reserves. How can we try and avoid these situations? How can we try and protect these this rich heritage, which, even though I'm not living in Bulgaria, but for me it is a common European world heritage for us. I look at some things with concern. I look at some research that is being done with great interest. I don't know who can help me in this.
Thank you very much, Edward, for your appreciation of Bulgarian nature and particularly Central Balkan. And I was very happy to hear that although you're not living in Bulgaria or not Bulgarian, you recognize this as a European heritage.
Yes.
This is something very important. I hope more people will have the same attitude of thinking. Regarding the Central Balkan National Park area, well, you've mentioned this is a national park. National parks have one of the highest and the strictest protection regimes according to the legislation. The enforcement of the legislation is a different story, as we have discussed. On the other hand, there are many reserves within the boundaries of the Central Balkan National Park, mainly forest reserves, with particularly beech and fir, etc., trees, which are also part of this UNESCO heritage list that I've discussed in the beginning of the presentation. In addition to this, Central Balkan National Park is also a Natura 2000 site. So you see how many different tools and instruments we have, but the enforcement is the weak point. The enforcement, the control, what is happening in the forest. You've mentioned that there are some photos, and yes, I believe so. I have also seen some photos of people collecting mushrooms or even poaching within protected areas and reserves. This also happens. We cannot close our eyes. The problem is with the enforcement of the legislation and the fact that there are not enough rangers within this huge territory of the Central Balkan National Park. And also sometimes it is a matter of personal dedication to the particular position or job you are doing. Some people are really keen to perform their job in the best way they can, but some people are not good in their hearts. So they make some, how to say, they organize some cheating and mechanism for kind of a corruption or kind of I don't know how to call it, but this is within the personal behavior of the people. And I don't know how we can change the individual perceptions. I really don't have an answer. Yes, please.
One of the things I had suggested to this particular person who worked in the park, I mean, this was about 2 years ago, was that there needs to be a review. No, I'm not talking about the Central Balkan National Park as a whole, which does have accessibility, but I'm referring to those 7 or 8 reserves within the park, like Tsaricina, I believe, Steneto, or Zedema. You have to correct me on the language.
No, that's okay. You're perfect. It's perfect pronunciation.
You know, there are some paths that cross into the heart of these reserves. Now, my suggestion was so that the core of such reserves will have no accessibility. And why do I say this? I've seen it from personal experience in Malta. Now, in Malta, we don't have the same natural wealth there is in Bulgaria. There's no comparison, because Malta is a country of now nearing half a million people living in 316 square kilometers with 2 million tourists every year. So you can imagine how built, 33% of Malta is built. So there's no comparison. But I've seen this in Malta when I was in nature organizations. They used to organize nature tours. Now, we were the people who loved nature, right? And we used to go to these places, and I used to see people picking flowers, trampling on vegetation, some people even throwing banana peels on the floor. No, so it came to my realization for a long, long time ago that unfortunately, even people who love nature, when they go to places where there is nature, they destroy nature. So the best thing to promote, even within conservation areas, is that in some of the strictest and most important areas of conservation, where you have, for example, a high percentage of bears, you have a high percentage of wolves, a high percentage of wild goat or deer, those areas will be no-go areas. Let's take, for example, the experience there was with the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, right? There was a whole area in that part of the Ukraine that was cut off from people. To the astonishment of the scientific community, animals, plants, trees that never existed there, and started growing back. Why? Because people just did not go there. So my suggestion is to any park really that is of the size of the Central Balkan. So you have an area which is 700 square kilometers that has different levels of accessibility. Then you have other conservation areas, like, for example, areas that are 10, 20 square kilometers. Then within those areas, you have maybe smaller areas, or you can actually redraw the places where you can actually avoid even accessibility. So in that way...
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
Thank
you very much, Edward. Yeah, good idea, good suggestion. Maybe it is applicable in some areas, maybe not in others. I believe people that you have spoken to from Central Balkan National Park, they're really great colleagues, and they're doing their best. So they will see the value of your suggestion, and if they can, they will apply it. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
I would like to move further with Marcia Mutsuri. Where does protection stop? Meaning that there is a lot of valuable, in many aspects, area of forest everybody would like to enjoy intact. But at the same time, we need to include the needs of society that lives from the forest, from harvesting, logging, non-wooden products, etc. So where do we stop within protections, since a lot of places also have potential to become old-growth forest? And how is scientific research from the forestry science incorporated to address both sides? Thank you for this question. I absolutely share your opinion. And we have been doing kind of a literary review and science study and analysis and discussions. And according to the outcomes of our research and discussions with scientists from Europe mainly, I'm speaking about Europe, the threshold is 10%, 10% of the forests to be protected. The rest would be absolutely capable of ensuring the needs and the wood and the other forest resources that we need from the forest as human population. So the answer for me is 10%. Of course, you can always argue and you can always discuss whether 10 or 12% is better, or maybe 8% is better. But finally, it is good to take one decision and not spend our lives in arguing, providing argumentation and disputing all the time. So for me, the answer is 10%. Again, from Bogdan Radu, do you think that the increasement of the old growth forest area will put pressure over the productive row of forests by decreasement of the age of exploitation and increasing of the exploitation area of the second type forests I have specified? In the case of Bulgaria, no, I don't think so. In the case of Bulgaria, we have made an analysis, and this is not a possible scenario. As you know, and as you, Bogdan, mentioned, in Romania, you have the management plans in the forest for 10 years period, here in Bulgaria as well. And the practice shows that foresters usually cannot complete these harvesting plans in the 10 years period of the validity of the management plan. So in the case of Bulgaria, this old growth forest protection will not put additional burden on the existing production forests. And Petko mentions that within Central Balkan Nature Park, there are 9 strict reserves. Yes, it is. And yeah, I see it is the hour is already 6:30, but Zori, you can say whether we will stay and discuss more, or how long the Zoom link will be available, or should we close the meeting?
We have enough time. If you have another questions, you can ask. You can unmute yourself and ask questions. That's why I would like to share with you our web page where all these materials from this webinar will be uploaded, and also you can join in our Facebook group, which is called Erasmus Environmentalists. It is public and it is open for everyone who is here. We have another webinars, you can join them also, but if you have a question in this topic, please ask now. It's your chance.
Yeah, we have time, so yeah. If anyone would like to say or to share something, you are welcome as well. Maybe not a question. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Regarding, so when it comes to conservation, now I noticed that many, you know, when sometimes people focus, for example, on animal life or on particular species, let's say their conservation, or the conservation of the wolves in forests. And then some people are interested in the actual size of the forest, the size of the trees, the old growth and quality. Are there any ways of, you know, these people, these different groups collaborating together? I think it's very important that when we speak about conservation, we never speak as in a vacuum, like I'm interested in just in the trees, or I'm just interested in the bears. Are there any platforms in conservation areas, let's say in Bulgaria, where you actually bring in these different groups, those who are interested in the conservation of bears, those who are interested in the conservation of the forest, together, those who are interested in the conservation of endemic flora, of, like, for example, mushroom species? I was actually reading over the past few days about the mushroom species and some rare mushrooms. So how would you, is there this kind of platform of collaboration?
Well, in the case of Bulgaria, I cannot say about Romania and Ukraine or Slovakia in this case, but I will speak only about Bulgaria. Bulgaria is a small country. We are less than 7 million of people. And there are so many Facebook groups and groups of interests already established, and colleagues and experts who have been working for years on mammals, on birds, or on natural habitats, or on mushrooms. They know each other. So these platforms, they exist in the form of networking among the science and research institutions, environmental NGOs, practitioners from the nature park and national park administrations, and also in the last few years, people who are interested in photography.
Right.
So
Oh,
it's
very
kind
good,
of an amalgama and networking, and
Okay.
it is not very formal, but it works, which is the good
very
thing.
good.
Yeah, which is the good thing.
And
But this is in the case of Bulgaria, and as I've mentioned, we are not that big country.
Yeah.
So everybody knows everybody.
Yes, and if I may ask something else, if I may ask maybe
Mhm.
a suggestion when it comes to the conservation of, it is something I've noticed about in particular in tourist brochures. Once I actually was looking about the Trojan municipality, and they have a website, right?
Mhm.
And I liked it because there are many interesting cultural things when it comes to the culture of the rakia, the pottery, the wildlife of the area. Now, when I was in this website and the person actually was communicating, you know, they had a poster on the Central Balkan National Park where they were actually referring to the large birds of prey, like the eagles, you know, and those large birds of prey. And now it is becoming a hotspot for ornithotourism.
Yeah.
However, I actually sent to the park, not the park, I actually informed the person I was communicating with on Facebook of the Troy municipality. And I told her, if you may avoid using, you know, this kind of advertisement. And the reason is, while it is good to promote natural assets, it is good, very good to promote natural and beautiful assets. One has to be very careful that when you put something on the media, when you put something on Facebook, it is going to be seen by everyone. It's going to be seen by the good people and it's going to be seen by the bad people. And this is what we need to avoid. We need to avoid promoting we have to be very, very careful when we find, in fact, I noticed that from the Central Balkan National Park, they are very careful about this because when they actually find a new species or they don't mention where. Even once there was a video of bears and there was someone who asked, where are these bears? And the administrator of the website of the Central Balkan National Park, they said, we don't give these details.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important. But
Yeah.
it has to go beyond just, you know, the personnel of the park, and we need to inform even the municipalities how to be careful, not to attract the bad people.
Of course, it is very important to keep the right balance. I understand that Trojan municipality might be interested to attract more tourists because they will bring some income for the local communities, but we have to be able to ensure the protection of the nature, which really attracts the people.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I fully agree that we have to be very careful. And yes, sometimes people are in the face of learning by doing, others are more precautionary. So yeah,
Nelly,
I would go for the precautionary approach. Da.
Can I comment the last topic because it become really extensive and it's really need of maybe a special topic on the national park and other protected areas and the regimes and how it works. In Bulgaria, we have a lot to share, and if there is interest, we can have a special session on it. But briefly about the Central Park and the national parks and the paths through the strict reserves, this issue has to be seen from different angles, and this is we should have in mind that the reserves in our mountains, some of them are pretty in a good state and not very small area, and this would allow some trespassing through their territory, and some of those paths are traditional tourist areas, and if you close them, this means from one side you're accumulating negative negative attention on behalf of the tourists. On another thing, you won't stop the poachers.
Poachers, yeah.
And the tourists are the somehow a natural barrier of poachers, of illegal hunting especially. And this is where we really need. I like what you said about the balance, and we have to balance between the different uses and different interests, and not always like try to destroy the traditions, and sometimes traditional uses like tourist trails, which are in general not very intensively used. They has to be kept like this. And this was the compromise made and allowed in our legislation, that specific paths, especially designed for or especially marked, well marked on the ground and known, allowed by the designation order or additional ordinance of the Minister of Environment, may allow passing of people through the territories. And yeah, this kind of approach has to be like followed. And we have naturally some areas where our no-go areas are.
Yeah,
and,
because they're hardly accessible.
Yes,
and you just can't reach these areas.
Yeah, and this, in the mountains, just to say in the mountains.
Yeah.
This is maybe more strict protection and limits needs to be established, or seasonal limits for some dunes areas or lowland areas where yeah, people used to go anyway, but it's disturbing to the specific habitat or species. And in general, to say about the tourists, about the visits in the national park, for example, in Central Balkan, or in Pirin, or in Rila, this is we should have in mind that there are major threats, like not just allowing 1 or 2 or 20 tourists to pass through the strict reserve, but there are major interests to destroy like half of the territory of the national park of Pirin, or opening some areas of Central Balkan for skiing, or yeah, things like that, which that kind of interest is hardly to balance. And
yeah,
that's why we have to really have a lot of gain a lot of support, and be very careful in introducing more and more stricter regimes, which are never abate, or never, the capacity of the state is not able, or there is no political will to enforce that. And once we are speaking about that, we should have in mind that the traditional types of protected areas in Bulgaria are about 5%, and the Natura 2000 areas about 35%. And this is huge, and this is a lot of challenges in that. And we are only few people, despite the facts we are many of us are united. We are experiencing a lot of different difficulties in Bulgaria to really to move forward and to keep what we are having. And I would encourage you and other like really lovers of Bulgarian nature, or not only Bulgarian nature, where the areas where you're visiting, please use the official ways. Don't just complain, but send official appeal to the green phone of the national park or the regional environmental inspectorates if you are witnessing some illegal activities. This would create a pressure. This would show that people are caring, and they are not simply ignoring what is happening around us. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Petko, thank you very much. This was very important what you have said.
Thank you, yes.
And Petko is from another environmental NGO in Bulgaria. And
I'm from a number of NGOs.
yes, you are from several
Yeah,
NGOs
don't
anyway.
point
We are
them
all
here.
like that,
Thank you.
Petko. We are all like that.
112 also works. I have tried, I have tested it few times, and in general, the results are not perfect, but easy
Yeah,
to remember.
absolutely. That's why I said that no matter who is from WWF, Greenpeace, Bulgarian Biodiversity Foundation, Balkani, or Green Balkans, we are all the same. And this is our biggest strength. And yes, I agree with Petko about what he said, that people are the biggest asset. And we people as active citizens and people who are sending signals, complaining to the right authorities, and just putting pressure on the control bodies to implement their tasks, we are very important. And for the last few years, I see more and more people are willing to do so, and this really helps. And authorities are becoming somehow more attentive, and this is the right way. This is the way. Yeah.
I thank also Petko. He brought in a lot of perspectives which I was not aware of, and it's actually interesting to see how sometimes it's true have to I mean put aside these small things when there are such bigger threats around us, and one of them is this skiing. In fact, I wasn't aware that there are actually pressure on increasing skiing in the Central Balkan. I thought it was much more related to the Pirin area, and I wasn't aware that there is also pressure on the Central Balkan as well.
There is on Central Balkan, on Riva, on Rodopie, on the Black Sea coast, everywhere where you see a beautiful and pure nature, because the nature is what attracts tourists. Yeah. And these business guys, they're not stupid at all. They know that if they build a ski resort somewhere in Pirin or in Riva or in Central Balkan, people will go there not only for skiing, but also for the nice views and for the beautiful landscapes and everything. That's why we have to be very strict and strong about this. And in Bulgaria, these are the biggest problems. The mafia guys and the people from the business who are willing to invest into the nature.
It's the same everywhere, unfortunately. It's not just in Bulgaria. And Malta will have the same problems. Well, even sometimes it's amazing how ideas of construction are done in some of the most sensitive areas. I mean, so I perfectly understand the situation.
That's why we have to stay together. Together we are stronger. Yeah, people who love and really care and want to protect the nature, from Bulgaria, Malta, Romania, Slovakia, wherever. This is the biggest strength of us.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I would like to suggest to end the meeting. Thank you for your participation and hope to see you in our next webinar. If you follow us on Facebook, you will understand when it will be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much, everybody. Thank you. It was really nice being with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelly.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Bye. All the best. Okay. Zoriš se čujem s tebe sad malo. It's difficult to leave the meeting, huh?
Thank you so much. I can do a like on the Facebook page, and I will keep on receiving the webinars, right?
Yes, you do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Yes. Thank you that you join us.
Yes, I will add you on the Facebook page so I can keep on receiving these the webinars, so I can keep on participating. It was very interesting for me. It was the first time. I've been reading about this for quite a while, but this is the first time I actually met people like this so close, on these issues.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
I also wanted to tell you that we have a Facebook group that is called Erasmus Future Environmentalists. This is the name of the project that we make the webinars on English. So if you want, you can directly follow there. Yeah. Although it's mainly for the Erasmus students, but we share all the information there on one place.
So Erasmus, can you repeat that again? Erasmus?
Erasmus Future Environmentalists. I will write it.
Okay, I got it. And Future Environmentalists. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.